Oseo, and welcome back. You know what it is. It's Real Talk with your favorite auntie and uncle, Tim and Phoebe. Now, what we're gonna get into lingua franca. Do you understand what I'm saying right now? This is lingua franca. Lingua franca is a pidgin language. It's a trading language that all of us use all over the world, all over the Americas, from North America to South America. We all use lingua franca. And Phoebe, why don't you tell us what lingua franca is and what it's made of?
Lingua franca simply is Latin for Frankish tongue. Frankish tongue is a trading language. It's a pidgin language. It's a language that everybody internationally speaks who trades commodities. You have to speak English or Spanish to some degree. It also consists of Dutch and French. This language cast a spell on all the indigenous people because it called us things that we were not. It took a lot of our words.
Let me say this.
Sure.
This is why we always say to you that words are spells. That's why they call it spelling. Remember, their original meaning to a word still stands even if you're ignorant, which means ignoring the fact of what the word really means. There's no empowerment in taking words that were derogatory to us and turning them around and making them affectionate names. You are my Niji, not my nigger.
Exactly. And respectfully, our channel is tailored towards the Nijis of North America. But in our research, we realized that Indians all over Turtle Island share the same experience, share the same words that have now had different meanings. Okay? We'd like to speak to the Puerto Ricans for a moment. The word Puerto Rico means rich port. You're more than a rich port. Okay? The word Puerto Rican is a word that indigenous people of that island used that once meant something much more powerful, but the Spaniards applied brave lord to the definition. That word no longer empowers the people because now the definition has changed. We share the same similar story because the term black is devoid of color. We are not black. We are not who strangers have labeled us as, just like they've done in many other parts of Turtle Island.
That's right. I mean, if you're saying black and you're proud, what you're saying is you're devoid of being or having any pride whatsoever. If you're saying black soul, you're saying you have no soul.
Let's break that down for you. And we highly recommend that you get this book. Okay, it was told in reverse. This book is by Dane and Taneisha Calloway. I would like to read you a quote from the book that explains why exactly black is not something that we should even be associating with. Here we go. That term not only stems from the government because of black codes that still exist. In that government, black codes, okay? As long as black face, that was derogatory.
See, all of those are derogatory terms that somehow we've been misguided into thinking that we can use for ourselves.
And all those terms came from strangers. Now, I know your parents told you not to go out and talk to strangers, right? But somehow we have been indoctrinated by these strangers uncritically. Well, now we're questioning everything. And this channel is here to give you the option to think. Here's the quote. The term black stems directly from the spells of the English language. Nearly every word that is associated with the term black was used in a negative sense, meaning that it has a negative connotation within its descriptive usage when referring to a group of people. In other words, it is an obstructive affirmation. For example, when people say things like black and proud, they are inadvertently claiming that they do not exist and are proud of it. When people chant black power, they are promoting a promising campaign that leads nowhere because it is not there to begin with. When people say That is Black excellence. They are visualizing a delusional superiority in hopes of a conclusive recognition when in reality it does not exist. Once people begin to think for themselves again, then they will ask the right questions, like, should we continue to call ourselves Black and uphold this ball of confusion when it comes to our true identities? Should we continue to allow strangers to slap us in the face by labeling us whatever they want, teaching us whatever they tell us, or even treating us however they treat us? We have tons of reconstruction to do, family, but it begins at home.
That's right. It begins with you and it begins with me. You have to start reteaching your children because they're being taught in the schools the wrong thing. In fact, it's a miseducation. If you think that you're educated now, you're an educated fool that's been miseducated by these schools. This is the time of awakening, people. This is the time for us to realize our greatness, to get back to realizing who we are, because the paleface, the colonizer, has always tried and has killed, basically, the Indian inside of us. They couldn't kill us physically, but they killed us spiritually, mentally. It's time for us to reclaim that.
And revitalize ourselves. There was a term back in the day that a European made that said, kill the Indian, save the man. A lot of us are walking around just a shell of a human being. And everything that's been put into us is from the schoolings, which started from the Europeans, indoctrination, compulsory education.
Mandatory, people.
That's what compulsory means, mandatory. And in the shell of a human being, we've been told what to think instead of learning how to think.
That's exactly right. That's why it's so hard for so many of us to manifest today, because we're not using the right tools. We're not using the things that are innate in us.
And the only way you can find out is if you go within.
That's right.
Go down that rabbit hole and be conscious of the words that you say. Words are spells.
That's why they call it spelling, people.
You have to have better intentions behind the words that you're using. But some of these words, we just got to let go.
That's right.
Like the term Black.
There's no empowerment. Listen to me very clearly. There's no empowerment in saying Black excellence, Black power,
or
Black
even,
soul,
or
anything.
Teaching our children this narrative.
You have to stop letting these schools miseducate our children as to who they are. You and I, our grandparents, our ancestors, all know who we are. Stop regurgitating what that miseducation that we've been through back to our children. Let's teach our children and share with them a story of greatness, a story of a great legacy of a people that have always been around, people that could not be killed, so they had to rename us. And then when that finally didn't work, because we were still continuing that oral history, they introduced compulsory education. It started from the missionaries.
And not only that, they imposed desegregation. Because remember, we were teaching ourselves before they even came over here. And when they came over and got comfortable, we weren't going to their schools. But somebody one day said, hey, you know, them white folks is learning and having a better education than you all. Who would know that if we were never in their schools? Our education was a better education because we were inventing things. We were still people of color and not devoid of color.
Remember, we're the colored people.
That desegregation thing also put that indoctrination and just
in full
sped
force.
it up.
Yeah, in full force. Remember, the war is still going on. It's a war on your mind because they could not kill us all. And in fact, as a matter of fact, people, family, we were doing all the killing in the first place. We were killing Every time we saw them, we were trying to get rid of them.
On that boat.
That's right. They couldn't even land ashore here without having a whole lot of trouble. And that trouble continued with these pale faces throughout the 1800s.
And you know what stopped it? What put it on hold?
What was that compulsory education?
When they started passing out that gospel.
That's right. The gospel according to their God. Okay? Think about this. Everything they've done in this society has been to empower them and to disempower you. This is the time of awakening. This is time for us to realize and to know who we are, and especially to pass that on to the children who are being miseducated this very moment. There is no power in thinking that you come from Africa, because this is your motherland, Turtle Island. Okay, this is your motherland. There is no empowerment in holding phrases that you don't understand. Remember, we've told you many times, if you want a better way of life, the quality of your life depends upon the quality of your questions. Ask the right questions. Realize that, the mistakes that we made in the past were only that of learning lessons. We're in a new century. We're in a new time. This is the time to no longer hold on to that old bullshit narrative. See, the reason why they want us so closely associated, those Europeans, with Africa is because Africa was colonized by them first.
And not only that, but Africa and Eurasia is hip to hip. So don't you think some of those pale faces came from Africa? Remember, it was told in reverse. Look at the picture. It was told in reverse.
And see, this was a plan that was started in the beginning by, of course, the church. The church wanted to send missionaries out throughout the world. They made covenants, they made treaties. France, England, Italy, Spain.
And they sent their criminals and prisoners,
remember that,
over to the New World.
That's right. That's right.
All right.
It goes very deep, but you have to stop today calling yourself an African American. Stop telling your children that slave story. We've already shown you and told you many times that the transatlantic slave trade did not happen the way they said it did. Now, yes, there were Niji who did go over to Africa, were sent over to Africa, but what you don't know is that they were sent over as missionaries under the promise that they would be able to get land that was stolen back from them, and that they were going to preach the gospel.
And that's how Libya was formed.
That's right.
All right.
And those people were handpicked. Most of those tribes came from the East Coast.
And tell me this, doesn't that sound familiar, like what's going on with Ghana now?
That's right. Exactly.
That sounds real familiar about that Ghana thing that's popular right now. Trying to get Nijis to go over to Africa to take those resources, supposedly, and new opportunities from the indigenous people there.
To disenfranchise them. Remember, if you're a racist, that means to disenfranchise, to hold back. A group of people. We have never been the type of people, ever, since the beginning of time we've been here, that would try to disenfranchise another. The mistakes that we made in the past, some of us who adopted that religion that the missionaries were bringing over to us.
And we're not knocking anybody's beliefs.
No, we're not knocking anybody's beliefs.
But you got to know where it comes from.
That's right. You have to understand clearly the words that you say. That's why we tell you to affirmate. Say the things that you want to come into existence. But you have to be careful. You have to understand this language, this lingua franca, to know how to use the words and how to put the proper intent on them. Because originally, a lot of these words are spells. So why not put a positive spell on your life? Why not teach your children something that is good, something that is real? Stop letting them be miseducated. Learn to become a sovereign being. Did you know that we owned over how many acres in the
Over 2 million acres
over
of
2
land.
million acres of
In the
land
1920s.
in the 1920s, throughout 1919, 1920, we owned
And before then.
20 million acres, even more before then. But we own 20 million acres of land. Do you know we only own less than 1% of the land now? And most of it is not the land that we were on originally. That land was stolen. Remember, we weren't farmers, we were cultivators. There's a difference in farming and cultivating.
Farming, can I say?
Sure, please.
Farming is when you sell your produce. Farming is the business. Cultivation is when you make the land better, not only for yourself, but for the land.
That's why we were employed. Once they stole our lands, we were employed as sharecroppers because we were the only ones who were intrinsically tied with the land and knew how to get the fruit and the benefits of the land. Farming, modern day farming in the past, has always been a business.
And it's always been applied to them. They're
That's
the
right.
farmers.
That's right.
They're the cowboys because cows are not indigenous to this land.
Oh, well, please.
So cowboy is a derogatory term. This ain't no cowboy hat.
No,
This
no.
is a Western hat.
That's right.
Okay? It ain't made of cow hide. Okay?
And when you're
It's made of straw.
When you're doing your research, they're gonna say African American.
They're gonna say
They're gonna
black.
say black a whole lot of times. That is to take you in another way. That is to take away the power of what actually is.
And that's to cast that spell.
That's right. Remember, you all, that's why they call it spelling. There's a reason for everything. You just have to think critically, and you have to realize that every time you feel that wind blow in your ears, you hear that wind pushes you, that's our ancestors trying to remind you of who you are. This is coming straight from the ancestors, and it's coming straight from our hearts. It's all about love. It's all about empowering. It's all about knowing who you are. And in order to navigate better in this system of things, the way America is now, you have to be a sovereign being. That's why we stress the importance of starting your own business, whatever it is, being your own boss. Because if you're going to work every day, well, you know that a job is just over broke.
And you're a slave to time.
And you're a slave to time.
If you don't want to be a slave to boss man, you're surely a slave to time.
That's
if you got to
right.
wake up a certain time, if you got to go to the bathroom at a certain time, and you can't go to the bathroom too many times at certain jobs, that's a slave to time.
That's
you
right.
want to own your own time. You don't want to be on anybody else's time.
See, remember, this miseducation that they gave us was strictly so that we could be disempowered and so we could stay in the position of working for them. It's time for us to start working for ourselves, educating ourselves like we used to educate ourselves before they made it mandatory compulsory education.
I'd like to read you one more thing from the book It Was Told to You in Reverse, which we highly recommend, by Dane and Taneisha Calloway. It summarizes everything that we're talking about right now and gives you little bits and pieces to connect the dots in other
Historical
places.
facts for those of you all fact-checking.
Okay, these are
Okay.
historical facts.
But they're truths.
Resources and sources are in the back, so you
That's
can
right.
look it up yourself. Let me read this to you. Can you recall any other group of people, no matter their skin complexions, being labeled primarily as the name of two continents? Not two countries, two continents. This is known as a misnomer, which is the act of applying a wrong name to some person or thing. And that should also be a major red flag to you. Can you recall the reason why our people want to be referred to as a color, black, and then allow strangers to refer to them as black as well, when realistically our skin complexions are different shades of the color brown? This means that there's no such thing as black people, and it only exists by the use of people's imagination being malevolently influenced, yet again, by strangers' manipulative indoctrination.
Black and white is a social construct created to keep division between us, to give one group of people the illusion of superiority and the other group of disenfranchisement.
Disenfranchisement.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You know.
It's an imaginary illusion.
It doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist.
Just like this illusion of inclusion that we seem to be under and bombarded by the media, by social media, you name it, we're bombarded with that. Remember, we undergird, we fund everything in this country. We are not the minority. We are the majority.
And if you can't tell, why don't you look at some of these commercials that are tailored towards us?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you look on Amazon and see that black business that they capitalizing off of? Why is it a black business, but you don't see these black businesses no other time other than Black History Month?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They're capitalizing off of us. Let me go on to read. Previously, the word black was used in a derogatory sense towards the needy up until the 1960s, when some mysterious manipulation occurred abruptly in our very own people as young adults, especially college students, began to claim that they were black and proud as a newly formed political trend beginning in 1964. But before that, we were lawfully labeled as Indian, Negro, mulatto, and then colored by the US government. The etymology of the word black means colorless or the absence of color. And we know this to be true because if you turn off the electricity in your house during the late evening hours, you would see only darkness. So if we were just being lawfully labeled as colored previously, and now are somehow consistent to label ourselves as black, which is the absence of color, then we are inadvertently placing ourselves in a state of not being present as a group of people, non-existent, when it comes to our actual identities, and more importantly, when it comes to the law concerning our constant demand for justice from this government. It ain't gonna happen if we keep calling ourselves black. That's why you see cases like George Floyd. That's why you see our young men, our young women being killed by this so-called government, this police system. It's because we have called ourselves something that we're not, and we're not fighting for the right things.
We need to fight for ourselves. There is no government on the planet that is going to look out for you and for me. Can't you govern yourself? I'm so tired of people not taking their power back. We all have this inside of us. All you have to do is state it. All you have to do is affirm it. It's so important that not only do we teach each other our real history, but we also should teach each other how to build generational wealth. That is so important in this day and time. It's not about the paper genocide that they're trying to put upon us. It's about how we think of ourselves. And I'm tired of us thinking of ourselves as African American or black. I'm tired of us looking toward another continent for empowerment, for love, when this is your motherland. if you speak to your grandmother, your mother's mother, on and on, you'll find out that we are the indigenous Niji of this country, of this land.
And if you know where you come from, New York, down south, you may be able to locate the nation you're from too.
That's right, even down in Puerto Rico, in the Caribbean, which is all called the West Indies, guys. Okay, there was a reason for that. That's because this continent, from north to south, including the Caribbean, is the West Indies.
That's right.
Is Turtle Island.
And in Puerto Rico, they know about the Tainos, but maybe you all can do some more research and see those hundreds of other nations that you may be from as well.
That's right. And remember, that word Borican that you're using was fine for one time, but now it's been taken by the colonizers, by the Spanish. It is so perverse. It is not who you are. You are an indigenous Indian of that land, and not only of the Taino tribe, but hundreds of other tribes that you need to resurrect, you need to bring back into focus, just like we're trying to do here.
With Cherokee and Shawnee.
And Shawnee and Blackfoot
and Creek and Chickasaw and Choctaw.
And Choctaw. Did you know that we here make the best Perique tobacco? Now that word Perique
is of course a French word.
Is a French word.
That means dark tobacco, made by the Choctaws and the Chickasaws.
In fact, cultivated.
Cultivate, not farm.
Not farm.
And don't you know that tobacco was the first resource traded?
That's right.
It wasn't sugar cane, even though that's delicious
and
too.
It wasn't cotton.
Okay, it was tobacco,
it was
honey.
Tobacco. We put tobacco around the world.
Good tobacco.
The point is that there is so many great things to talk about other than that colonizers' Black History Month. It disempowers you. Stop being black. Stop trying to give away your power by looking toward another continent. Remember, we have invented everything that the world is using. The world tries to assimilate our habits, our culture to a degree.
We call it appropriation.
Appropriation. They have appropriated everything. Stop giving it away. Stop allowing other people to label you. We're just like you. Remember when we put a copper penny up to our faces to show you that you are the copper-colored people? We all, as Indians, as Aborigines, need to come to the table. We need to show the world that we are no longer ignorant, which means to ignore. We are no longer ignorant as to who we are. Let's embrace our beautiful, long legacy. We weren't kings and queens. That's lingua franca. That's a European word. We were chiefs
and chieftains.
It's time to stand up as chiefs and chieftains and take control of our lives. It's important that you teach your children the right history. The history that they're being taught by looking at television, by going to school, is a miseducation. It's a travesty. It's made to disempower. There has been slaves since the beginning of time. Why are we the only people who covet, oh, we came from slavery and we're working our way up? No, we have always been up. But what has happened was we have been taught to deny our own power. We have been taught that this is not our land. But as a matter of fact, as a matter of truth, this is our land. You are the indigenous Niji. You are Chickasaw. You are Choctaw. You are Blackfoot. You are indigenous to this land. Stop giving away your power to Europeans, to foreigners, to pale faces, even those infiltrators who come over here and who are the same color as you. Just because they're the same color doesn't mean they're kinfolk. We are your kinfolk. You know, you can't make a phone call to anywhere in Africa unless you're African or from somewhere in Africa.
And they're not referring to themselves as African American.
That too is a lingua franca word, Africa.
But even the ones who can make a phone call to Africa, they ain't calling themselves African American.
No.
But go on, you can't make no phone call.
And understand that most of the Africans that came over here were pale face. Okay? There were plenty pale face Africans that settled along the coast of South Africa, mostly Dutch. That European connection. Remember, they put them in slavery along with their own people since the beginning of time. Slavery was not only a prison term, but it was also indentured servitude. You have to understand the meanings of slavery so that you can clear this up with your children. Because you have your children thinking right now, oh, we came from slavery. We were all prisoners. You know, we were brought over here on a boat, which was impossible, people. We have been here for millenniums.
Since before they record in time.
That's right.
That Gregorian calendar didn't come till the 1500s.
We need to take back our power. We need to stand up. We need to take our land back. It doesn't take very many of us in order to do that because we are, as I told you before, we are the majority. Understand, if you're the majority, then you must be able to understand that you can affect change. But you can't affect change calling yourself something that you're not. And these words, you have to understand the meaning of these words. As we told you, it even goes down to things like good morning. Good morning was a Victorian term used for families that had recently someone who was dead, who had died, and they were saying, have a happy morning of this dead person. But in this Francolingua, in this miseducation, we were taught to use their words. Good morning. Good morning. Come on. Grand rising. And for those of you all who want to remain ignorant of who you are,
which is to not acknowledge the truth,
then go right ahead. We don't need you. We want the people who want to know who they are, the people who are tired of this bullshit constantly, over and over and over again. I'm not black. I'm not African American. I never will be. I won't teach my children that. I won't tell anyone that I'm that way. Anybody I meet in the streets, I tell them exactly who I am. Remember, white and black is nothing but a social construct created by not only the church, but instituted by the government to disenfranchise, to permanently keep us apart.
And to create an illusion for the other side.
That's right. But see, they've been miseducated too.
Get the book. It was told in reverse. Get the book by Dane and Taneisha Calloway, some of the best teachers on the island. Just
start educating yourself. Start educating your children today. We are not black. We're not African Americans. We did not come from Africa. Stop saying it.
And you ain't come off no boat. We'll see you soon.
Unless it's a boat going down to Mississippi, and we had plenty of those.
Okay. Like, share, and subscribe. If you could pick up what we put down, please. Let somebody else have the opportunity to think, okay? Because this is the unpopular message.
That's right.
Make it popular. Make it poppin'.
Bye.